My stepmother used my social security number to enroll in nursing school, under my name. When I fought back, she told the police I was mentally unstable and hallucinating. They nearly committed me. Now she's banned from practicing medicine, and I've changed my name. I still check the locks twice every single night. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. My father married Sandra just 7 months after my mom died in childbirth. I was 17, lost, and Sandra moved in with her minimalist rules. She threw out mom's journals and repainted my room without asking. I told myself she was just trying to help us move on, but one night I caught her burning letters from my mom in the backyard fire pit. She smiled and said, "Less clutter." I felt sick. Sandra insisted on being called mom just weeks after moving in. When I refused, she hid all the family photos, replacing them with portraits of herself. I found my real mother's necklace in the trash. Its chain snapped. When I confronted Dad, he said I needed therapy to process my anger. I stared at Sandra's smirk during dinner, wondering if he ever really saw her. I miss Mom more with each passing day. When I started applying to colleges, Sandra insisted I consider nursing like her. I told her I loved literature. A week later, my acceptance letter from State University went missing. She said I never got one. But Mrs. Peterson had helped me apply. She confirmed the email had arrived. I searched the trash and found it, torn in half. When I confronted Dad, he slapped the counter and yelled, "Don't accuse your mother." Sandra began opening my mail. I came home to find her at the kitchen table with my college brochures and personal bank statement. "We need to discuss your future," she said flatly. I grabbed the papers, furious. "You're violating my privacy," I snapped. Dad shrugged. "You're under our roof." That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time. Mrs. Peterson suggested documenting everything. I started a hidden notebook under my mattress. My email account locked me out. When I reset it, I saw sent messages declining interviews and deleting my college applications. Sandra denied touching it. Dad sided with her, said I was paranoid. Beth Price, my mom's cousin, came over and whispered, "You're not crazy. Your mother suspected things too." She gave me an old photo album Sandra had tried to toss. Inside was a note from Mom, "Trust your instincts." Always, I started believing myself. Sandra registered me for a local CN course. Forging my signature, she told people I'd always wanted to be a nurse. I found out from a neighbor congratulating me. When I protested, Dad said, "She's giving you direction." I showed the forged paperwork to Mrs. Pearson. She looked pale. "You need to get out." She whispered, "But where could I go?" Sandra had even intercepted my text messages. I felt surrounded, trapped inside my own life. On my 18th birthday, I confronted them at dinner. I laid out a folder, screenshots, emails, the torn letter. Sandra laughed. "Delusions again?" Dad glared at me, stone-faced, but then Beth stepped in. "We've contacted a lawyer," she said. Sandra's smile froze. I felt my hands tremble, but I kept speaking. "You've been erasing me." Dad walked out without a word. The room held its breath. I finally felt seen. But it wasn't over, not even close. The next morning, my phone had no service. My laptop was wiped. Sandra claimed I'd destroyed it in a rage. Dad said I needed psychiatric help. I called Beth from the school office. She drove me to a safe place, Uncle James' cabin. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the word unstable echo. Dr. Chen emailed me a recommendation letter. He'd seen my essays. His words, "You're brilliant. Fight for your story." I held on to that. I filed for a legal name change with Miss Rodriguez's help. We needed proof. I scoured Sandra's home office while she was out and found a stash, copies of my birth certificate, FAFSA forms, and a nursing school in my face. Her name. I photographed everything. When I handed the file to Miss Rodriguez, she said quietly, "This is serious. We'll take it to the DA." It was the first time an adult truly believed me. A court-ordered psychiatric evaluation loomed. Sandra claimed I fabricated everything due to delusions. But Dr. Kim, assigned to assess me, saw through it. "You're not unstable." She told me, "You've been abused." She documented Sandra's manipulation patterns. I wept, not from fear but relief. Uncle James squeezed my shoulder as we left the clinic. "You've got backup now," he said. It wasn't over, but the mask Sandra wore was cracking. And people were starting to see it. Sandra tried one last time. She left a voicemail crying, saying she missed me and only wanted her daughter back. I didn't reply. Ms. Rodriguez got the DA to press charges for identity theft and fraud. When I walked into court, I wore Mom's graduation stole. Sandra avoided my gaze. Dr. Chen sat in the back row. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. The silence when the charges were read felt like the beginning of justice. Weeks before the trial, I requested a full birth certificate from the state. What arrived wasn't what I expected. Listed under father was a name I'd never seen, Marcus Williams, not Michael Davidson. I called Uncle James. There was a long silence. "Then your mom was pregnant before she met Michael." He knew everything rewired. My dad had lied about everything, including being my father. I wasn't just fighting Sandra, I was fighting Erosir from the start. I dug deeper. Marcus Williams had died in a car accident 2 years after I was born on a construction site, where Michael also worked. The police ruled it accidental, but in a box of old photos Beth kept, there was a newspaper clipping. Witness says brakes were cut. My blood ran cold. Beth whispered, "Your mother was scared, Emma. She left that box in my care, in case anything ever happened. What if Michael wasn't innocent?" Uncle James confirmed the whispers. Mom had confided in him once, said she feared Michael might have orchestrated Marcus' death. "But she stayed quiet for your sake," he said. "She thought you'd be safe if she played along." I sat stunned. Everything I knew about my family was shattered. Sandra wasn't just cruel, she was part of a cover-up. The legal case focused on identity theft, but my mind was spiraling through decades of buried fear and silence. I subpoenaed old employment records with Ms. Rodriguez's help. Turns out Sandra had worked at the same hospital where Mom delivered me, and where Marcus' medical file had mysteriously vanished. The paper trail was thin, but the timing was damning. Dr. Chen flagged a research article. Sandra co-authored a paper on cognitive regression in trauma victims. She wasn't just erasing me emotionally, she'd studied how to undermine mental credibility. I wasn't imagining it. I'd been her case study. Sandra's emails, retrieved from a backup server, revealed she'd posed as me in nursing forms and applied for medical credentials under my name. She'd even uploaded an essay I'd written in high school, claiming it as her personal statement. The forensic team linked the IP addresses. "This isn't just theft," Dr. Ramirez said. "It's identity possession." In court, Sandra's attorney stammered when confronted with the evidence. The judge ordered a mental health evaluation, this time for her. Dr. Kim testified in court. detailing Sandra's psychological manipulation and the damage it caused me. This was systematic, she said, designed to break identity cohesion. The courtroom was silent. Michael never showed. He filed for divorce from Sandra 2 days after her indictment. But that didn't feel like justice. He'd watched it all happen. I looked at the jury. One woman nodded. My story wasn't just being heard, it was finally being believed. I wasn't invisible anymore. A woman approached me after the hearing. Alexandra, my old college roommate. Sandra messaged me back then. She said, pretended to be you. Said you dropped out because of drugs. Alexandra had believed it. She cried when I showed her the court documents. I'm so sorry, she whispered. She became my key witness in the civil suit. Her statement confirmed the social sabotage I couldn't prove alone. The lies had traveled further than I ever realized. In discovery, we found Sandra had filed taxes under my social security number. For 3 years, the ERS opened an investigation. Ms. Rodriguez said, this expands beyond state lines. It's federal now. I sat in the legal aid office, stunned by how far she's gone. I wasn't just fighting for my name, I was reclaiming years of stolen life. Beth hugged me tightly. You mom would be proud, she said. And for the first time, I believed it. Sandra's parole hearing from a past fraud conviction had been sealed, but Ms. Rodriguez dug it up. Turns out, this wasn't her first identity scam. She'd impersonated a patient to gain access to prescription pads. The hearing transcript described her as calculating, charming, and morally vacant. The judge in our case allowed it in as evidence. When I read the line out loud in court, Sandra finally looked scared. Her mask had cracked and now, it crumbled. We subpoenaed her nursing school applications. The handwriting matched mine traced from old journals she's stolen. Forensic analysis confirmed it. She practiced your signature, Dr. Ramirez testified. I remembered the day mom's last journal disappeared. I had blamed the movers. Sandra had used my grief to create her fantasy. A professor testified that Emma Davidson had passed a pharmacology course without ever attending. The mask wasn't just off, it was shredded. She'd built a life as me. Sandra's sentencing was delayed due to a mental health evaluation. Meanwhile, Dr. Kim submitted a letter confirming her manipulative patterns. She mimicked trauma responses, it said. The court psychiatrist diagnosed her with narcissistic personality disorder. Not insanity, that meant full legal responsibility. In the gallery, former coworkers from her hospital days gasped. One mouthed, she did that to me. I weren't the only one. Sandra wasn't just a stepmother, she was a serial predator hiding in plain sight. In the final week before sentencing, a mysterious envelope arrived at Ms. Rodriguez's office. Inside was a thumb drive. No return address. On it, audio recordings of Sandra coaching someone to impersonate a patient during a medical board interview. The voice Michael's. My stomach flipped. Ms. Rodriguez said, this changes everything. Michael had been more than complicit. He's been active. The DA opened a separate case. Justice wasn't just Sandra's to face. The whole system cracked. Beth recognized the voice too. He helped her fake a pregnancy once. She whispered, told everyone it was a miscarriage. My skin crawled. Michael and Sandra have fabricated entire lives. My therapist, Dr. Kim, helped me write a victim impact statement. You erased my name, my past, and my future, but not my voice. I read it in court. Sandra never blinked, but when I locked eyes with Michael, he looked away. That was victory enough. Alexandra testified about the smear campaign. She read texts Sandra had sent pretending to be me. One read, tell the professor I owed dig again. The courtroom froze. Dr. Chen shook his head slowly. They weaponized your trauma, he told me later, but you weaponized your truth. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sandra's sentencing date was set. Michael's hearing loomed, and I walked out of court holding my name. Uncle James handed me a letter he'd kept sealed since my mom's funeral. It was addressed to me. Inside, her handwriting. If you ever feel erased, know this, I saw you. I loved you first. I cried for hours. That letter wasn't evidence, it wasn't proof, it was truth. And that mattered more than any court ruling. In reclaiming my name, I hadn't just survived Sandra's cruelty, I'd reclaimed the love that birthed me. And it was enough. The news covered the trial's final day. Headlines read, stepmother sentenced in identity theft ordeal. But it was the closing shot, me walking out with Beth, Ms. Rodriguez, and Dr. Chen, that mattered most. We were a mosaic of survival. At home, I framed my new id next to mom's graduation photo. Same name, same strength, different story. When the cameras left and silence returned, I whispered, I'm still here, and for the first time that felt real. At my college graduation, I wore a sash embroidered with my legal name, Emma Williams. Dr. Chen hugged me, whispering, you wrote yourself back into existence. The audience clapped, but it was Beth and Uncle James' proud faces that mattered most. I touched the silver bracelet mom left behind, it symbolized survival. The legal battles were over, but the echoes remained loud in my mind, quieter in my life. I turned my tassel and thought, she didn't win, I did. Now when I speak at trauma workshops, I bring my forged nursing badge. I hold it up and say, this was never me but someone wanted it to be. It's not revenge, it's reclamation. I see young women nod, clutching notebooks like shields. I use mine to mom's last journal, now filled with my own words. Dr. Kim says healing isn't a straight line. But every time I speak truth, the path clears a little more, and I walk it. Sandra received a 7-year sentence. She lost her nursing license permanently. Michael faced charges next, but I didn't watch that trial. I didn't need to. Justice had already begun. At home, Beth repainted my room lavender, like the bushes mom once planted. Alexandra visits often. We talk about rebuilding. My name is now on published essays, legal documents, diplomas, and it's mine. Every letter, every syllable mine. No one will erase me again. Not ever. Sometimes I still check the locks twice, but now, it's out of habit, not fear. I teach creative writing at a community college. My students write about identity, truth, power. I tell them, your name is your story, own it. Dr. Chen invited me to speak at a university panel. Afterward, a student whispered, you helped me believe myself. I smiled. Not everyone gets their name back, but I did. And now I help others find theirs. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to check out more stories on my channel.